Today on my channel, we take an old clapped out 455 Buick and we make it brand new. Whew, I'm tired. This is our 455 core that we just picked up. I'm getting ready to put it on the stand. This is an early 70s motor. It was kind of cool because it came with the original exhaust manifolds. I haven't totally decided, well, I should say the customer hasn't totally decided what he's going to do yet as far as running headers or exhaust manifolds, but I picked this one up because everything's there. It's even got the old distributor in it, not that we'll be using that. But the motor does rotate, and it was a running core as far as I know. And so this is going to be our builder. So we'll get this thing out here and start getting it apart. Also, one of the things you want to look at on the Buicks is the nice thing about them is they actually have the cubic inch on a lot of these right on the motor. So if you look back here, there we go, 455, and it also has the casting number and a date code. The date codes on this one came back to 1972, so we definitely got a 455 here, and got the original intake and everything on it. So yeah, looks like we're in business. Just a little bit of background on the 455. We've got our 455 here. The block has been cleaned, magnafluxed. We stripped the whole thing down. Now this block was a core that we purchased. It was a 1972, I believe. I'm not sure exactly what it came out of, but I looked around and I tried to find a decent core, which is no easy task for a 455 Buick. And we finally found one. We went ahead and bought a long block. I got the block stripped down. We disassembled it, cleaned it, magnafluxed it. We bored the cylinders to 30 thousandths over. We cleaned up the heads. I'm not totally sure if we're going to use these heads yet. These are the early 70s casting, 71, 72. Now Buick had a bunch of different heads. Their highest horsepower year for the 455 was 1970. The 455 is also in the same engine class as the 400 Buick that they made in the 60s, and they also made a 430, and everything's kind of interchangeable on those three engines. The 350 Buick is a small block. It's a lot different. So Buick actually does have small blocks and big blocks. So with the Buick 455, now just in case some of you out there were wondering about this, you need to make sure that you make a distinction between a Buick, an Oldsmobile, and a Pontiac, because Pontiac and Oldsmobile both had a 455. The thing is, the 455 Buick and Pontiac were completely different engines. They had the same cubic inch size, And the same thing is true with the 350s. The 350 Chevy, the 350 Pontiac, the 350 Buick, and the 350 Oldsmobile, all completely different engines. There's been a lot of confusion over that about that over the years. So this is a 455 Buick. It was actually made by the Buick division of General Motors, and the Buick is unique. A Buick is a Buick. It is not interchangeable with any of those other GM products. So the project that we're working on now is what we're attempting to do is get 500 foot-pounds of torque. Now, that sounds like a lot of torque, but the reality is that the early Buicks, that's actually very doable from the factory. There were some factory engines that had 500 foot-pounds of torque, and that would have been in 1970. So one of the nice things about the Buick engine is this was what GM called their lightweight casting. And so what they did is they made a very light, they lightened up the block a lot. In fact, the block is a lot lighter than a 454 Chevy by quite a bit. It's actually, when the Buick 455 is assembled, it is only 25 pounds heavier than a small block Chevy. So that's pretty impressive for 455 cubic inches. So if you have an engine that weighs about the same as a small block Chevy, and you get 500 foot-pounds of torque out of it, you got something. So they really did a good job lightening up this casting. And so the 455, the first year was 1970, and it went through 1976. Now, unfortunately, in the years following 1970 and 71, they diminished the horsepower and the torque rating due to emission standards and lower octane fuel that was being offered. And every year it progressively got worse until 1976. In 1976, the 455 was pretty pathetic, and it was actually phased out. 1976 was the last year. It just, the low octane ratings and the fuel economy, one of the things that the federal government did in the mid-70s is they really ratcheted up the fuel economy standards for these manufacturers. They had to meet a certain level of fuel economy. And the big blocks, the 455 Oldsmobile Buick, even the 454 Chevy, they were not really very good at, they couldn't meet them. They couldn't meet those standards. Now, the 454 Chevy did survive, and the reason it did is because basically it was in trucks. It was a truck motor, and those fuel economy standards did not apply to trucks. Well, unfortunately, Buick doesn't have a truck, nor does Oldsmobile. And so, yeah, it kind of killed the big block era. But we're going to go through and build this thing, and we're going to have a good time doing it. I'm going to walk you through the build of this 455, and hopefully we'll learn something together. I've done a few Buicks in the past, but I'm certainly not I'm certainly not someone who has done a very large amount of Buick engines. I've been doing a lot of research on this engine, and the more research I do on this thing, the cooler it's turning out to be. So the heads that we have we're probably not going to use because they were a lower compression version. Now, one of the things that I did notice about the Buicks is the cylinder heads. A lot of the cylinder heads have really small CC chambers, and if I got on my computer and did my compression ratio calculations, if you use a flat top piston in this engine, it actually comes out with the smaller chamber heads, which was like 1970. It actually comes out to like 12-to-1 compression, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's not going to work for pump gas because this motor needs to be a street car. I did watch a dyno test on YouTube a while back where they had basically a bone stock 455, and it was making 400 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque with exhaust manifolds on it, and basically a quadrojet carburetor. That's pretty impressive, and it was basically stock form. One thing I did notice is all the pistons that I'm looking at is they have a huge dish. When I took this engine apart, the pistons that were in it were stock, of course. They have they had a huge dish. I mean, it's just like a recessed dish. Well, I'm thinking, man, this thing's got to be super low compression. Well, when I looked at the CCs of the heads that are available, it's like, okay, now I understand why they put that big CC dish in there, because the combustion chambers on the Buick heads, are even the 455s, are pretty small. Some guys will use the 400 heads and port them out and put bigger valves in. The Stage 1 heads, which was the high performing head that they had in 1970, has much larger valves. They actually had basically the same head with smaller valves for the lower performance engine. So the nice thing is if you find a set of those heads that have the small valves in them, of course, we have a machine shop, we can buy the big valves and install them in the heads, and now you got Stage 1 heads. Do a little bit of porting, match porting probably. We're not going to get crazy on this thing. So hopefully this is something that's intriguing you. I haven't done videos for quite a while. I've been out of the loop. I have a new shop. It's a new location. It's a big mess right now. I got to get this place cleaned up. But we're definitely going to go forward with this 455 Buick. We did regrind we're going to use the cast crankshaft because it's a pretty hefty, pretty thick unit. It's right here. So it's got pretty large rods, and it's got really large mains on it, and it's, from everything I've read, it's a pretty thick casting. And this is a cast crank, but you know, these things with cast cranks, we're making 500 foot-pounds of torque from the factory, and they seem to hold up pretty good. So I think I'm pretty confident with that. We're not going to get real crazy. It's not going to be anything that we're going to race. We're not going to do anything like that. It's just going to be basically it's a restoration project, but the guy obviously wants some power. So hopefully this is intriguing you. So stay tuned. I will keep you updated on this thing. I've got a few. The day that I brought the thing home, there's a couple of things that you should be looking for on the Buick. I'll probably tack those videos onto the end of this one. So stay tuned, and we will delve into this thing real soon. I don't have the parts for it yet. I do have the block machined, and I'm also searching for a set of the 1970 Stage 1 heads that we're probably going to go with. I don't have a set of those. There is a company out there called TA Performance that has aluminum heads for these things, and they're making crazy amounts of power with these Buick engines. These engines have a lot of potential. Unfortunately, this customer does not really have the budget to do that. So we're basically, if we get 500 foot-pounds of torque, he's going to be happy. So we're thinking we're just going to replicate that factory Stage 1 motor, probably put a better camshaft in it, maybe a set of headers, a better intake, because the factory intake on this thing is, you know, the big old cast iron monster. In fact, that thing is sitting right back here underneath the stock valve covers, and it had a quadrujet on it, obviously. So hopefully this is intriguing you. Don't forget to subscribe below and stay tuned for more. I'll talk to you soon.